know if he's going to be here in just a moment. Mr. Braynard. Okay. My apologies for logistics being a bit of an issue here. Would you be Matt Braynard? Hot diggity, we can get on their way. Mr. Braynard is the next one on the list.
If you're not, you are now.
Yeah, you're going to be at that table, sir, right there. Yep. Looks like you're going to have a minute to get set up. Is that maybe not so? I
think so.
All right. And I presume you want to have what you have to show us on the screen as well? Yeah, all right. Our AV guys will take care of that. While you're doing that, Mr. Braynard, will you be able to accomplish what you've got to say in 30 minutes? That would be a blessing. Thank you very much. And as soon as we got you on the screen, while we're waiting on that, would you please give your name and your credentials and just 10 seconds on what you expect to show?
Sure. My name is Matt Braynard. I'm the leader of the Voter Integrity Project, looking into anomalies and potential illegal ballots cast in this election in the 6 pivotal states, including Arizona. I have a background working in voter data, going back over 20 years with the Republican National Committee, with President Trump's campaign, with election administration and redistricting firm Election Data Services. So this is an area where I have a lot of experience and expertise. So, are you ready for me to start?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Proceed. Thank you.
A couple days after the election, just a second. I and a team of dedicated individuals with experience similar to my own in the field of voter data and analysis decided to engage in an experiment of sorts to detect potentially illegal ballots without any preconceived notions about what we might find, what we would want to find, just to try to determine the truth using a couple of different analytical methods. Fortunately, despite the great expense of this experiment, we were able to fundraise through crowdsourcing in a very short order. We've raised over $600,000 from almost 9,000 different donors all over the country who are interested in finding the truth. And we entered this with although many of us have political biases, personally, we brought none of those biases to our analysis. We just decided we wanted to try to find the truth using methods we believe to be reliable. Our findings were across the country. We found a tremendous number of anomalies. And Arizona is at the forefront of many of the anomalies we found. Now, unlike many other states that we evaluated, there were some unique limitations to our analysis in Arizona. In general, we were only able to get data for early and absentee voters in all of the 6 states we targeted. In Arizona, we were only able to get early and absentee voters for the county of Maricopa. So all the numbers I'm sharing with you, all of the analysis is based solely on Maricopa. Now, as the other counties make their data available, we'll certainly try to update these reports and these numbers. But just looking at Maricopa, we found some interesting results. So I'm going to open up a PowerPoint that kind of covers the country, but I'm really just going to speak about Arizona, which is, I know what you're interested in. So. Okay, so we ran 5 or 6 different experiments on each of these states. One experiment that we ran where we isolated a universe of voters according to the state who had been sent an absentee ballot but did not return that ballot. And we asked them 2 questions. One, we asked them, by reaching out to them via phone, because we were operating 3 different call centers to try to reach these people to confirm whether or not they had ever requested that absentee ballot and whether or not they returned it. So in Arizona, we were able to reach 2,044 people who had been identified as having requested an absentee ballot and not returned it, according to the state. Of those, 44% of them said they never requested that ballot. Then, among the individuals who did say they did request it, we asked, well, did you send it back? And among those, of the overall universe, we had 354 of them say, yeah, I actually mailed it back, despite the state not recording having received it back. Now, I've got a little bit of audio-visual for you because our call centers were recording phone calls. Now, none of this is speculative. I know that some people have, other analysts in some of the court cases I've been involved in have taken our numbers and then projected them. Say, for example, projecting that 44% of the did not request of our sample out to the entire universe of about 500,000 unreturned and saying these are the number of ballots that it seems or appears possible that somebody else requested those ballots other than the voter of record. But I'm not doing that myself. Others are welcome to make that analysis. I don't have a background as a statistician. But what I do have is I'd like to share with you some of the audio recordings of at least 2 of the individuals we spoke to who said that they did not get a ballot. They did not request the ballot despite being sent them. Now these audio recordings have been modified to cut out like their last names because we don't want to inadvertently dox anybody here. But if somebody privately, as you are in positions of authority in the legislature, wants photo recordings, we're more than happy to share that with you. More than happy to give you the names, addresses, phone numbers of everybody we've identified in these categories. Okay? So I'm going to play the one audio recording of an individual. Bear with me as I make some adjustments.
We recognize that technology is great until you actually need to have it work.
Yeah, but we can find a workaround if we need to. So I'm just going to hold the mic to the computer speaker.
Can't hear it.
Can we get it out of this? Okay, we'll try it again. Okay.
Hello, this is Mary Kemper with Voter Integrity Fund. May I please speak to Charles?
This is. Who are you with?
Voter Integrity Fund. Charles Mart's in the state of Arizona and is having requested an absentee ballot. Did you request an absentee ballot?
Absolutely did not.
No. Okay, and did you? Okay, no. Okay, somebody from our team will follow up with you, and can you please give us the best phone number? Is it this?
So I'll play for you the second example.
Hello?
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, is this Zofa?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Taj. I'm with the Voter Integrity Fund. In the state of Arizona, it said that you requested the absentee ballot. I'm just making sure that you requested that ballot.
No, I did not request an absentee ballot.
Okay, somebody from our team will follow up with you. Is this a good number to follow back up with you on?
Yes.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time, and you have a good day.
Okay.
Excuse me, Matt, before you go too much further, can you tell me what counties were those calls made to? Were they
The
all
only
Ma-
county
all
that's
Maricopa?
released data for us is Maricopa.
All right,
So-
thank you.
Sure. I'm going to proceed. So we, with some of the other experiments we ran, one of them was, again, no one's ever kind of tried to do this after an election before. Nobody's had the interest or the funds to do so. To really think about, if people were trying to cast illegal ballots, either it was part of an organized voter fraud effort or just somebody just deciding I'm going to cast a ballot I shouldn't, maybe a ballot that's not for my name, just one individual deciding, I got an absentee ballot request to this address, my address, this person doesn't live in here anymore, but maybe I should fill it out and see if I can cast it, or, potential clerical errors. No one's ever really done this before, so we tried some stuff that just kind of that made us curious, things that we thought we might find things. So in Arizona, we actually pulled a universe of people who had never voted before, except they've showed up and voted this election. And just call them and say, hey, did you actually cast that ballot? It's very hard. Any of you who've, I'm sure in your maybe races for office, have operated phone centers or conducted public polling, when you start out with a universe that's pretty big, once you start trying to dial that and get responses, that universe shrinks a lot and shrinks very quickly, because you have a broad universe, then you have to try to pen phone numbers to it, and you get maybe half of them or so, and the people who the numbers are correct, or they don't go to voicemail, or some other problem, and people who actually pick up the phone and then start answering questions, that universe shrinks a lot. So we did this experiment in Arizona with some, again, voters who had never voted before, and asked them if they had cast that ballot. Now, about 1% of them told us that they didn't. But remember, those were people willing to talk to us and admit that they did not cast a ballot. And many of the people we reached, we had to leave voice messages for. We just couldn't get a hold of. But one person in particular, I want to play a video for you guys, who we left him a voicemail, but he never talked to us, so he's not included in these numbers. So I want to share just a clip, if I can, from a program. Let me adjust the volume here.
Maricopa County, Arizona, to Tennessee about 5 months ago so he could train for the Olympics. So you can imagine his surprise when he got a message from something called the Voter Integrity Fund.
The state of Arizona is reporting that a ballot was cast in the name of Nishan Garrett in the general election on Tuesday. If Nishan Garrett did not cast this ballot, please call us back.
Well, that doesn't sound fishy at all, right? Well, Nishan didn't think so either. So he went to the state of Arizona's voting website only to discover that his ballot had been accepted. And Maricopa County's voter portal said his ballot was signature verified and counted. The only problem is he'd already voted in Tennessee. He didn't vote in Arizona. Nishan Garrett joins me now. Nishan, great to see you. Now, you never received an Arizona absentee ballot or an application for mail-in ballot, so who the heck cast your ballot in Arizona?
That is an excellent question. That is an excellent question. I have no idea, and that's the reason why I'm on here with you tonight.
So I'm going to stop the video there.
What does it make you think about this?
But I think you get the drift of that. I'm actually going to play for you another recording here, which actually this one was particularly interesting to me.
Hi, my name is Thomas with the Voter Integrity Fund. May I please speak with Riley?
Yep, speaking to him.
All right, hi. Can you confirm whether or not you cast a ballot in the state of Arizona?
I'm a felon, so I can't vote.
All right. Let me see here. According to the state of Arizona, somebody cast a ballot in your name, and you may be a victim of voter fraud. Can you please give us the best number to reach you?
I mean, probably the one you're calling me at.
So I cut the video because, whenever we reach somebody like this, we want to ask them a couple questions. Is the best number to reach you at? Would you be willing to sign a declaration or something like that so we could pass that off to attorneys? I think those are two, and we've got hundreds of them of different categories. So we'll, as you've heard, we have recordings of everyone we spoke to, of the 900 or so that didn't request, of the 354 that said they did request but mailed it back and somehow state never got their vote. I want to talk about one of the other experiments we ran. We, at great expense, obtained a national voter file, and we used it to determine people who may have been registered here, moved to another state, registered to vote there, I believe invalidating their residency or inability to vote here, and then cast a ballot back here because, we all have anecdotes, right? We've all heard crazy stories. I've had people, since this project has started, emailing me stories about the sister-in-law or brother-in-law they don't like, they suspect they may have cast 2 ballots. They want me to look into it and giving me their full addresses and dates of birth. Or I've also received, though, screenshots of social media profiles saying this person, they live in New York City. They've lived here a long time, but they figured their vote wouldn't really matter in New York City, but it would matter back in Arizona. So there's anecdotes, right? I don't think it's ever possible to maybe get enough of those anecdotes to have a meaningful number. But what we did is we took our national voter file and looked at registration dates there. And then we looked at the registration dates of people we matched it to in Arizona, where they moved from Arizona to California, for example, registered to vote there, and then decided they shopped their ballot, potentially, or they had the ballot cast in their name, and decided, you know what, my vote might count more in Arizona than it does in California, swing state. So we were able to identify these individuals who had a subsequent registration out of state but cast their early absentee here. Again, just Maricopa County and just early absentee, no election day. We also did an NCOA analysis. And when people move from one state to another, the Postal Service sort of tracks that. Often people fill out an NCOA card saying, I've moved here, please forward my mail. It's a pretty good indicator they've established residency somewhere else. And we found among this population a substantial number who NCOA to another state, but cast their ballot here. Now, I've kind of earned the reputation lately as kind of a data guy, but I work as a general consultant. I do all kinds of work around the country for candidates, everything from speeches to fundraising to designing literature. I've knocked on over 1,000 doors myself this cycle in states all over the country. And I can tell you that a lot of times, people are they move and they're very careful about where they can vote, where they can make potentially cast their vote, where they think if they have options, they make a choice, and sometimes they don't always make the right choice. So just in my experience of that, it's not that uncommon. So people move, but they can still vote here. They get an absentee request forwarded to them, and they cast the ballot. They shouldn't. When we combine those numbers together for your state, and we merge, and we take out some that we estimate to have been military moves, which they don't actually lose their ability to vote in the state, we came up with a total of about 5,700 or so, just Maricopa, just early absentees. We also identified a population of double voters. Now, what's unique about this is that, again, we're not looking at people who maybe voted in person in California and voted by mail here. We're only able, because of limited data in many states, to compare early absentee voters to early absentee voters in other states. So if they voted early absentee in Arizona and voted early absentee, for example, in California, they'd show up here. But if and when we get access to election day voter lists, we'll be able to, these numbers will inevitably go up. And also, we've got a lot of limitations on our ability to match. One of those limitations is the availability of full and accurate dates of birth from states on their voter lists. In a lot of cases, states will suppress that. And that that prevents us from being able to get a successful match on somebody who moved out of state with a subsequent registration. Because for us, for our project, we can't be the voter integrity project without integrity, and that requires a very tight match. So we're sure it's not just somebody with the same name, or even somebody with the same name, born in the same year, but it's got to be day, month, year exact as best we can. And we actually try to match on cell phones too when we're able to do that. So that kind of concludes the initial findings that I wanted to share with you about your state in particular. And I'd be happy to take any questions if you have them.
Mr. Mayor, do you want to ask this gentleman some questions?
You go ahead.
No? All right. Matt, I really appreciate you coming in. I know that you flew in, I think, late last night to make a short and succinct presentation. Can you tell me, relative to the work that you've done, with certainty, how many votes were cast that should not have been? Just a high-level number, because obviously, for example, the Trump campaign would like to see 10,457 votes overturned. But, not to be exact, but are we there based on the work that you've done? Because as we look at your work and the work of other people, we're starting to chip away at that number in a pretty serious way.
I would say there's 2 levels of confidence I have, okay? The first level of confidence is very. And I'm very confident that we get very close to that number when we take the residency issues and then apply it to the other counties for which we weren't able to obtain data. The second level of confidence is where you take a number of projection. We go back out to low activity analysis and NCO analysis, which I'm not going to get in the weeds, but these are basically people telling us that they had votes, that they didn't cast votes that were cast in their name. If you're comfortable projecting these numbers to the population that we were trying to reach via phone that we just couldn't, I think then you reach another level of certainty that you're able to bridge that gap. So I think that I have a high degree of confidence that the number of ballots that were cast that should not have been cast, illegal ballots, surpasses the margin of victory as it stands right now.
Thank you very much. Representative Biasucci, you're the first to ask questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, second, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt, very much for your presentation. I just had a couple questions. For the 44% that you said did not request an early ballot but got one, how many people did you poll to get that 44%?
Well, we started off, as you can see in the chart, or maybe you can't see, with a large number of unreturned ballots in your state in Maricopa. And then we reached out. We were able to get a phone match to maybe 250,000 of those. The number we were able to reach via phone is 2,044. The number who said they did not request that ballot was 902. Now, when your colleague asked me the question about how many, what's the margin of illegally cast ballots, my estimate, I don't apply any of this, but this does raise a lot of questions. And should a ballot be counted if somebody themselves did not actually request it?
Right. That's a very good, and that's why I'm asking that question, absolutely. And then the 1%, was it the same?
That amount? Was this is among our shot in the dark, calling people on the phone to ask them, did you actually cast the ballot? Because their voting history suggested that they hadn't voted very often, if at all. So that's this universe that we decide to reach out to, and we pulled a data load in the state of in case of your state, of about 35,000.
The 1% of 35,000.
Right, but that universe could potentially have been much larger. I just wanted to give our phone center an amount to sort of chew on, and the numbers. Again, we saw the video of Mr. Garrett. We never spoke to him. He doesn't show up in these numbers. He just got the voice message. And, I got to tell you the tremendous amount of courage for someone to do what he did, because when you become public, come forward in a situation like this, willing to say that you may have been a victim of voter fraud, you're all in the public spotlight, right? You're used to this. But if you're just some guy who seems to be the victim of voter fraud, all the things that have to go through your mind are, you're going to have a target in your back. You're going to have potential media trying to trash you, dox you.
Sure.
You have to talk to your wife about it first. What impact can it have on your occupation, on your family? So the willingness of him to actually go on television, I think, there's got to be so many more people that just, not that they didn't have his courage, but just their life conditions would not allow them to come forward as publicly as he did.
Yeah, and I think, I don't care if it's one voter that this happened to. I mean, it's illegal, right? And this is the problem. And the fact that even 1% of your 35,000, that should scare everybody. That's even happening. So I appreciate you getting the data. Thank you.
Senator Borelli? Representative Bartow, any questions?
Just real quickly, I was wondering, you mentioned Arizona has more anomalies than other states. Were we the only ones that had this kind of anomaly compared to other states with the unrequested absentees?
That actually was a universal problem to all 6 states, to some degree, but I don't think any had it quite to the same degree as you did. I'll just consult my chart, but that was my recollection. Yeah, it was far more substantial in Arizona. And looking at all these different states, they actually all have their own unique things that kind of make them stand out a little bit. And this is something that was unique to Arizona that made it sick. Because, in other states, they had serious problems in areas where you didn't have problems. But this was a problem that seemed to be more prominent here than we found it elsewhere.
Would you think that's a feature of, absentee balloting is very popular here in our state? I mean, we've had it for years and it's growing, and voter confidence in the system had been growing until really there was more information about the vulnerabilities that have been coming to light, and the questions about that. Do we compare? How do we compare with those other states?
Well, I think you have a stronger history of absentee ballot voting here than the other states do. But I think what's important is that, I've got a phone center, I've got data analysts, I can request things from different commercial vendors in your state, Secretary State, I can do it. But what I can't do is round up a posse and go around and find out, well, who requested this ballot if this person didn't? How did that happen? I can't, if it was done electronically, I can't track the IP addresses, I can't find the envelopes and that arrived in and dust it for fingerprint. That's something that's got to either be up to you guys or the law enforcement of your state or some other law enforcement agency. But getting the question in terms of who cast Nashawn Garrett's ballot, how did that happen? Was it clerical error, maybe, or signature verified? It wasn't just a cast; it was signature verified. Something went wrong here, and I don't have the power to find that out. I can just present it to you guys and to others who have similar authority. But I'd really like to know the answer to that question. I don't think I'm alone.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mayor Giuliani, you had a couple questions?
Yes, I do, sir. Just a few things that maybe I don't quite understand, but might be very helpful. The governor and the Secretary of State, I believe here today, certified the vote. It would seem to me that the one thing that you can be sure of, whether there are enough votes to overturn the election or not, or that the vote count is inaccurate, the one that presently exists. Is that right?
I believe that unless the questions that I raise get answered, you can't be confident of what the vote count actually is, and no one can.
But the present one is very questionable.
It is extremely questionable.
Not subject to a declaration under perjury that it's true and correct.
I agree.
Would you sign a declaration that it was true and correct in a statement to the federal government?
I absolutely would not. I would probably I would put myself at risk of going to prison.
And if I were your lawyer, I would tell you not to do it. Could you, based on your expertise, if in fact they hadn't been so hasty, or the legislature were to take the responsibility, could you conduct an audit in which you could come to a reasonable degree of certainty on how many illegal aliens voted?
It's good you asked that question. The federal government actually makes available a database of people, not necessarily who are citizens, but the opposite, people who are illegal aliens or green card holders, etc. And I actually have the document that a state would use to request that, to have that check done. And it's my intent subsequent to this because we've got other things flying around, but to pressure every state in the country to make this request of the federal government. And that request has to come from the Secretary of State's office. Now, what I don't know is, has the Secretary of State of this state ever made that request to bounce their voter list up against that to see who maybe is not qualified to cast a ballot? But that's an excellent question. That's what I think they should do.
Want to make a bet?
I'm not a gambling man.
Betting outside of the casinos here
I'm
is
sorry.
illegal, sir.
Let's go across to Nevada, and we can do that. But seriously, with the number of illegal aliens in Arizona, in the millions, it's almost beyond doubt that some voted. And the margin is so small, 10 million. Wouldn't you be duty-bound to conduct that study before you certified a winner in this election?
I would agree, and it's so many things we can talk about that we shouldn't be happening at this hour. This is the kind of thing that the state should have done before Election Day, before a single ballot was cast. So remove the risk of contamination, and what's just as dangerous, I think, is the suspicion of contamination.
Right. Well, there's one study that was done that said 236,000 illegal aliens voted. I have no idea what their methodology was or how they produced it, but if you had time to do it, could that be done with a degree of certainty with regard to the number, even if it were an estimate?
Well, to figure out the precise number is difficult, but to hold your voter list against what this federal government will provide and match, you'd be able to subtract a substantial number of the illegal immigrants, or not just illegal immigrants casting ballots, but I think probably as prominent, which may increase your numbers, are people who are green card holders.
Yeah, non-citizens.
Other visas where they are here legally, but...
it's a bigger universe, non-citizens.
It's a non-citizens who are permitted to vote. Yeah, it's a much bigger universe, and I could certainly do that analysis, but I could not do it without the signature of the Secretary of State on that letter to the federal government requesting access to that database, because as you know, as many of these people know, it's very hard to figure out who actually is a citizen and who is not, or who's entitled to vote and who is not.
And how about the number of felons who voted that were not entitled to vote? That's been estimated at over 200,000 also. Would an audit of the voting list be able to assist in determining an approximate number?
The mechanics, the technical mechanics of an audit are easy. Getting the data of all the felons who would be ineligible, and not just complete data, not just that data, but you need to have full names of dates of birth at least, and then have the reciprocal data from the state, which they should have, and if they don't, that's a huge problem, because we've encountered many cases where the state on their voter list, they've got like a blank, or they'll mark somebody as the default, like born on January 1st, the year 1900 or something. So to be able to conduct that analysis is easy, but to get the resources of the data behind it to conduct it may be challenging, but the state has a better capability of doing it than anyone else, and if you want to retain me to do that, I'd be happy to send you an invoice.
And how about people from out of the state voting?
That's an analysis we did run, but again, our numbers on extremely low side because we needed to have a high degree of confidence. The state itself could probably do a much better job of doing that analysis, and other states would be able to find more people who we couldn't discover having moved to other states based on real estate records, claiming the homestead tax exemption, which I think also established residency in another state, and just being able to do a much more vigorous match on voter lists, because again, we only got what the state gave us. We don't have what the state itself has.
There was a poll that was published that said that non-citizens broke 80-20 for Biden. How would someone do a poll like that?
You know, I would have to see what the sample size is.
At least they made an attempt to find out who are the non-citizens. It seems like the governor and the Secretary of State just don't want the facts.
I've actually worked for many pollsters. I actually used to work for Frank Luntz, and I think figuring out how to do a poll of non-citizens in an election they shouldn't be able to vote in that's got a very high degree of difficulty. But Biden's doing really well with that group. I don't know why.
But that sounds like a pretty sensible breakdown.
Yeah.
So, just to sum up, in addition to all the hundreds of thousands of ballots where Republicans were not allowed to observe while the Democrats dealt with them secretly, there are also the clear fact that non-citizens voted. The question is how many. There's the clear fact that felons not entitled to vote voted. We just don't know how many. And that people from outside of Arizona voted. We just don't know how many. And in each case, the governor and the Secretary of State put their names on a certification that the results were true and accurate, and never bothered to make a single effort to find out about these obvious areas that would change the numbers.
In a municipal election this same year, I was working for the candidate, and one of my responsibilities was as poll watcher. And when it came time to open up the absentee ballots, I was sitting in the room, and I made sure I could hear and see everything. And in one case, a name came up, and I had my list, and I raised my hand. I said, I object. That person doesn't live here. Doesn't live in this city, shouldn't be able to vote here. They took his ballot out. They examined it. We had a conversation about whether he should or not, and they actually that vote was invalidated. It was spoiled.
You must have been in a state that follows the law.
I was, in fact, but if you do not have the ability to do that, it undermines the credibility of any election result.
Thank you very much, Mr. Braynard. I appreciate it.
Members on the panel, any other questions for Mr. Braynard? Representative Cook?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask you about the votes that you were talking about, that you could go in and you could find that stuff out, and I think we heard some misinformation. It wasn't 10 million, it's only 10,000 and some. And keep in mind, we don't need to find 10,000 votes, and I'm not saying we're for one person or versus the other, but 5,500 votes would change an election. So when you look at the numbers that you have presented just right here, right, and you call in question of, I won by 10,000 votes, let's say, well, 5,500 votes would change the election. And so it's very alarming when I see your information up here and the voicemails that you've had, but thank you for your work.
Thank you, sir.
Point.
Representative Townsend.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to that point, there wasn't just one election here in Arizona. There was many. And we lost one seat in the Senate by a very slim margin. So I think it's important to remember that we're not just looking at this for one person's election, and Arizonans have a right to have representation on a clean, fair election. And your information is quite shocking. That would have changed the outcome of several elections here in the state. So I think an audit is warranted.
Thank you. Mr. Braynard, I've been trying to refrain from commenting, but I'm going to tell you that you have just shown a light on something that confirms, I think, for all of us that this is not an illusory issue. We have seen, this is hard. You know, somebody asked, where's the smoking gun? And I want to see the blood splatter. There it is. All right. So thank you very much, sir. I appreciate your testimony.